And our next item is item D, Professional Engineering Task Order for Daugherty Drive, Heritage Oaks Boulevard Extension Project. Mr. Mills?
Thank you, Mayor. So, as you said, this is the agenda item for the engineering services that would be performed for the extension of Daugherty Drive, Heritage Oaks Boulevard. The slide up there, it's an overhead of the existing situation where you can see that Heritage, I think all of you know this, but Heritage Oaks Boulevard ends where you see there, and Daugherty Drive ends at Henry Avenue. If this project is built, then those two sections would connect to their respective points, or at the respective points. There is a history, I think, as most of you know, to the project. I believe 6 years ago or so was when it was originally, it originally came up. At the time, there was no budget for it, and there were some objections to the project in general by some of the property owners within that general area there. And so the project at the time did not proceed to any type of fruition except for some of the design. The partial design was used to help build the intersection improvements at Henry and Daugherty. So it wasn't completely put aside, but we did use some of it to, the scope of that job was added to, but right there at the intersection, that was originally part of this project. And I should have said, the reason that we did those improvements was this project not being built at the time. So we believe that was a good thing to put those improvements in. If this is approved, then that's already designed to tie into exactly how that was built. DRMP, if you recall, was the alternate engineer. Since we have quite a few projects going, our other engineer, ISS, has done quite a few. DRMP is in the process of designing, Mr. Morgan mentioned, the M1 Canal project extension of a big water main. And so far, we've worked well with them. They've done a good job on that. So with all that said, you have the task order in front of you that shows what they would do. It includes the design, the permitting, construction services, and prior to that, bidding services. And so with that, if the City Council proceeds with the project, then the recommendation is to authorize the City Manager to execute this task order with DRMP Inc. for the Daugherty Drive, Heritage Oaks Boulevard Extension Project in the not-to-exceed amount of $129,254. Any questions? Be glad to answer them.
Before we get to your questions, we have two speaker cards. Let's hear them first. First speaker is Scott Smith.
How doing? Scott Smith, 2204 Botanica Circle, right up to my deck. I thank you for your time. Well, a little bit of history here. I was born and raised here, and I've kind of watched dirt roads, paved roads, 4-lane roads, traffic lights, stop signs, everything involved. And I'm looking at that project right there, and I'm trying to really kind of ponder what the purpose of that would be. I kind of look at right now and say, Henry could probably use 4 lanes, by funneling traffic through a neighborhood. I think the money might be well spent in other areas. I can give you an idea. 2 hurricanes ago, I'm a police officer, and I came over and checked at my house, and I was underwater all the way down Midden Road up to my headlights, and Hanukkah was just below the knees from the crust of the road that floods. So I have to be honest, if you're going to fix the flooding there, but I just don't see how anywhere there's a road that could be there without reducing that canal size or putting in some sort of cement sewer pipe, and I'm sure that's what this purpose is, or this $129,000 we'll never get back moment. The whole area was originally designed for the attraction for us to move there was a cul-de-sac mentality. So we could go in there and not worry about thoroughfares, speed, having speed bumps, stop signs, et cetera, et cetera. We have a lot of people that come to our neighborhood just to run around the four corners. A lot of bikes, a lot of elderly. And we do already have some inherent problems with speeding, little neighborhood and fussing that we deal with on our Heritage Oak page. But I really would wish you would all kind of consider it. I'm not sure how much it's going to cost, but $1.2 million in the city sure could go to another place, because the only thing this is going to do for us is take traffic from Doherty and bring it to us. And our traffic's already backed up. We got another housing development just popped up. It takes us between our little ladies that do the school crossing. I don't know if anybody's ever experienced them. Bless their hearts, they try, but they cause more of a problem. So you're 6 car deep on a left-hand turn on the southbound lane, you're not getting out in the first cycle. It's not going to happen. So if you double the traffic, which is already doubled with the new housing that's going to come in, and then the whatever shortcut, because I take the shortcut. I go up Midden, go down Henry, Doherty, hit the gyms, hit Publix. So I only can imagine that people are going to do it vice versa, and they're going to come back through there. So we're looking at a very large traffic influx. So, I mean, if you're going to do it, I would like to see a bike path with maybe a road access, because the hurricane emergency that everybody says that we may need to evacuate, hurricanes, we got 10-day warning for the most part. We really don't need an emergency exit for a hurricane. And if we do, we have other problems. So a walkway, bike path, and extension. I'm sure the development area right through there, we use another access to it. It's a little dangerous for the kids to be walking through the schools. I just think we could rethink it. I know it's a little political, obviously, but I know the majority of the people in our neighborhood, which my daughter lives on that side, it's really going to put a burden on their fence line. And I'm sure you're all familiar with Heritage Oaks fence line battles that we deal with constantly. So there's not a lot of space or easement on Heritage Oaks. Won't be on that one. But if you would consider that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Tina Coker.
Good evening. My name is Tina Coker, and I live at 2335 Botanica Circle. Thank you all for having the opportunity to speak about the Doherty extension. I was born in Florida, lived here my whole life. I've had my business here in this city for 37 years. My concern is not only the flooding issue, but the issue of often safety for students. But in addition to that, one of the things that I learned when I go to DC to walk the Hill twice a year is that when I speak to Congress people, they say, tell the story behind it, make it personal. Well, this is personal for me because my property backs up to that. But to me, the issue is that I sit on several national boards and international boards. One of the things I find, one of the ones that I sit on, we give scholarships for college students. And as I sat on that board, before I got there, they had a tendency to pull things out of reserves. And that's what you're proposing to do this road. I can tell you in two of those situations, they had shortfalls to provide scholarship for other students. This is the first time this came up, the first time I heard about it, I immediately wrote to everybody here that was on the council at that time, and I was told, well, it was an issue for hurricane evacuation. Having lived here my whole entire life, and I used to live out past 95, you couldn't get out on 192, you couldn't get on 95 for one of the hurricane evacuations. I think it was in 2004. So you've got an access point on Henry, less than a quarter of a mile to go east or west, and now you want to bring it through not Botanical Circle, but on Heritage Oaks. The traffic is horrendous. For every single reason I can think of, I just don't think it's a great idea to take money out of reserves and put a road in that nobody in our neighborhood wants and is going to increase the traffic. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak this evening. I hope you will reconsider your decision and suspend the Doherty extension. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coker. Our next speaker is Justin Lauer.
Hey, good evening again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. I'm Justin Lauer at Botanica Circle. What's on the agenda tonight is the start of a very controversial, unpopular project. It's spending $130,000. Step one is this engineering order. If this is approved, it's going to go down the road and most likely get executed. So what I'm asking for you to do tonight is to stop this project right now, dead in its tracks. We don't want to waste $130,000 on this initiative. As far as that goes, this project's highly unpopular. I saw 0 people here tonight actually in favor of this project. If you go back and look at the tapes and you go back and look at the transcripts over the past 2 years, overwhelmingly, most of the speakers are against and very few for ever come here. So I'm not sure who you're representing when you're voting for this project. Maybe the people that voted for Bill Metrick, but he's not up there right now. So I encourage you to go with the majority who is against this project. I do, Barb. Barb, you came into this council 8 years ago with the message of heart for the city.
Justin, please direct your comments through here.
I think
Okay.
3 minutes is up.
We don't want our hearts broken, Barb, that's all. Okay. And the cost versus the benefit here is the real major issue. So we don't know how much the whole total project costs. We're talking about spending millions of dollars on this. You don't even know what the total cost is, and you're going to shell out $130,000 before you know what the total project costs. Yeah, no one's been able to estimate that yet. It should be estimated, it should be out there, and there should be a thorough cost-benefit analysis before step one ever goes forward. So please, right now, do whatever it takes to stop this project, delay this project, take it off the agenda. It's very controversial and unpopular here in West Melbourne. So thank you for giving that full consideration.
Thank you. All right. And Ms. Smith, you have your light on first.
First, I'd like to make a motion before the discussion. My motion is to authorize the city manager to execute the professional engineering task order for the Doherty Heritage Oaks Boulevard Extension Project, not to exceed $129,254.
Thank you. We have a motion from Ms. Smith. Do we have a second? Ms. Young?
Second.
Yes.
Discussion? Yes, Ms. Smith?
Yes,
Oh, yeah,
please.
you're first.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I'd like to say that I've been in the city more than 20 years. I've sat up on this council more than 6 years. I believe that I represent, my job is to represent the over 20,000 people who live in our city. We have luckily, everybody seems to want to live in West Melbourne. I understand why, because I want to live in West Melbourne. It's a wonderful place to live. We have the best police department. We have great schools. We have great leadership. And many things contribute to having the want. But unfortunately, with all that comes is construction, is building. I remember when Heritage Oaks didn't even exist. And there were trees. But unfortunately, the way progress goes, trees have to come down to make some of the people's homes. The people screaming don't want to let their house be knocked back down to pull a couple of trees up. They just want it to be happy because their tree is there. But my job, sitting up here in council, is what's best for the city. We have a traffic issue. the traffic that flows on Minton Road is horrendous. Unfortunately or fortunately, that they're going to start enlarging Hollywood Boulevard. So that's going to make our north-south even heavier. But when I say I represent everybody, this is a project that was in everybody's eyes from the second that they decided that that may be the place they want to live. We received dozens and dozens. I have letters here. People who live in that community that want it. But it's not just about that community. My job is to help Minton Road, to get some of the traffic off of Minton Road. By having only one exit we've already done more than a few surveys. You know, we have 800 houses that do up to 7,000 trips a day. So even 20% of that to take off Minton Road and put it someplace else, I can't make these cars disappear. None of us can. But we have to at least help Minton, because Minton right now has a lot of empty properties that are going to be commercial. We were thinking about putting an old age home next to a post office might have 50, 60 cars, and rightfully so, we're worried about that impact on Minton. Well, here we have the opportunity to take at least 20% of the 7,000 trips that are made a day and have them go someplace else. So that is my job. I have to worry about people that live on the other side of 192. They travel Minton. I have to worry about the people who live off of Minton Road, not just the people who worry about the backyard. If you notice, the builder, he's the one that gave the property. He's the one. There are people saying in their messages to me that this is what they were told. That's why they picked this community, because eventually, with money and time, it would have two ways in and out. They were promised that. They are expecting it. We didn't just decide out of the air to pick up a road and decide put it in. This has been in progress before anyone lived in Heritage Oaks. So with that said, what about all the stores that are going to be put on Minton? More traffic. People are entitled to sell their property. They're entitled to build on it. Businesses are entitled to come here, but that brings traffic. So this is our one shot to alleviate some of the traffic. And in doing that, one of the man who lives on Luna Court wrote today, and he said, not only we live on a one-way in and one-way out, he said, I worry all the time because the island that goes in is full of trees. Let a big tree fall down, just one, blocks everybody. How are you going to get out? Oh, maybe you don't want to get out. That's okay, too. But that's not what I'm doing, worrying about the 800 houses. Of course, they're my concern. But so is the other 19,000 people. We need to help Minton. One shot to do it. But I might say with that, the Council of West Melbourne has already approved to have the project done. It's passed. So, and the vote was 6-1. So that's not what we're voting on tonight. We're authorizing to give the man money to start. We have a chance to do something for Minton, and we're not going to have a chance again. So think about it. Think about the 19 or 20,000 other residents, and think about poor Minton Road. And it is our job, if we have at least a way to alleviate some of it. It's not going to make it right. It's not the most ideal, but we need to do it. So that's where my motion comes from. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Ditmore.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to make a couple points here. Currently, anyone who's driven on Henry Avenue, especially during the rush hour going eastbound, you'll see that the traffic is somewhat backed up. It's backed up so much today that we bothered to put pavement markings down. I assume it's our city road. We put pavement markings down there not to block some of the side roads there. And also, Ms. Smith brings up a point that they're going to be widening Hollywood Boulevard. Until that takes place, I think that, and I'm not sure when that's actually on the agenda to actually be done. I think what we're going to do is be offloading more traffic onto Henry Avenue, which I don't think is really designed for that. And the vehicles coming out of there are going to have to either go, if they're trying to use 192, they're going to have to go eastbound on 192. They can't go westbound on 192. There's no turning there. So they're going to be forced to either go westbound on Henry, which puts them in the same situation. They're back on Minton. So there's really no relief from Minton if they're trying to go north on Wickham or west on 192 to 95. So this road isn't going to help that issue at all. The Henry Avenue is going to create more of a bottleneck at that intersection, Henry and Hollywood, so I don't see an advantage there. And the intersection at 192 and Doherty is controlled by a stop sign, and that traffic control device is not going to be adequate enough if there's a line of cars trying to come out. I did make it a point to speak to about every resident that I could during the campaign and during the early voting period times. I spoke to everyone I could that lived in the affected area. And I will say I did not find one person, and I did try to find one person, but not one of those people that I spoke to said yes or no. They all said they just didn't care. So they weren't for or against, but just really didn't have an opinion on it. I was kind of shocked because I thought for sure we would have more impact from these folks. The one thing that I would suggest is maybe looking at some alternative issues, like low-speed vehicles, and making also an emergency egress out of there and I spoke to Mr. Bachelor during the campaign, so I can speak for what we spoke about, and I don't want to steal his thunder away if he's going to bring it back up tonight, but one thing that we did talk about was he brought up was an opportunity to stick some type of a pole in there that they could remove for emergencies or whatever, to use the road as an access in emergencies. But I think a walking path, the tie-in with the north side of Doherty looks really nice over there. Low-speed vehicles that people could actually travel those roads to get back and forth to the grocery store up there, things of that nature. I don't think this is going to be this great relief on Minton. Right now, with what's going down over there on Sawgrass, potentially you're looking at adding 700 more homes down there. Anything that we do here at this point, providing a back access back there is really, I think, is a moot point. So I will not be supporting this at this point. I don't believe that it's going to create any ease the traffic issues at all on Minton. I think it's going to create more of a problem on Henry Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bachelor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There appear to be a number of very fundamental questions regarding this proposal right now, especially within the task order related to the design phase. For example, the traffic concerns that was mentioned by Mr. Ditmore, the drainage concerns that have been mentioned by the residents, and the actual relief, the traffic relief that it would actually be provided. It seems a little expensive to spend $130,000 and not end up with very clear explanations for the concerns that the residents do have that are backing onto there. Is there not a intermediate step that can be taken to answer those questions without having to spend $130,000?
Which questions are you specifically referring to?
So in reviewing the design phase of the task order, I'm not finding very many details regarding what we are going to be delivered as a result of spending $130,000. If this money is spent, are we going to know what the potential drainage issues are?
Oh, yes, sir. This is for the complete design of the drainage, the roadway, sidewalks, everything else in detail to build, so a contractor can take those plans and actually build the project. So that's what the design process is to determine all those details and any other engineering concerns throughout the process.
Understood. So does that include the impact of putting that, of laying down that road?
The impact,
the traffic impact, the environmental impact, the drainage?
There'll be an environmental portion of the design, that's part of it. As far as the impact goes, this doesn't include a traffic study, no. So if you're talking about, you know, how many cars are going this way or that way and which roads get affected by how many cars, no, that's not part of this.
So we're not going to, as a result of spending this $130,000, get the answers that both sides of this discussion are wanting to find out. Is that a fair statement?
With reference, if you're wanting a traffic study and the things that would result from a traffic study, the answer is no, because this doesn't include a traffic study.
And we're not going to understand the drainage, and we're not...
No, the drainage will be part. The only thing that I'm hearing that you're referencing that wouldn't be included in this task is the part about the traffic.
Mr. Mills, I think in the past we've done something with the traffic. Mr. Morgan, can you chime in on that?
We had that updated in 2017. The traffic engineer modeled the expected trip distribution changes if this were constructed, and obviously it's a model, but in terms of the impacts at intersections and segments through different areas, that has been modeled by a traffic engineer. So we weren't proposing to remodel with 2019 data that which was modeled in 2017. So that's not part of the scope of services that's proposed.
Is it correct in my understanding that that was traffic simply as a result of the residents that live in the area rather than other traffic that is going to use it as a rat run?
That most recent study just models traffic with the existing. It doesn't model any of that other traffic.
Because I think it's fairly predictable that it will become a route used by traffic that is not part of the residential complex there.
There will be some utilization.
Yes.
It wouldn't be optimal because you're going to pass through two four-way stops. You're going to pass through a stop that doesn't exist at the end, and then there will be another stop there. So, for example, if you're traveling northbound on Menton to turn right onto Henry, it'll almost never be optimal to travel through Heritage Oaks and then north on Doherty. So it's not going to be an optimal cut through, but it will get some utilization for that, which will help alleviate some of that bottleneck at the intersection of Menton and Henry currently.
Yeah, I agree that most certainly we see drivers taking interesting shortcuts around that area of the city, including using the post office parking lot, including using the Lowe's parking lot.
So those parking lots actually can speed them up because they're able to light skip that way. They shouldn't do that. It's an illegal movement, but they're not going to get the same benefit by going this, because whatever time they save by skipping that light, they're going to hit multiple stop signs along the way. So it's not ultimately going to be a rational choice. Will some people make that choice? Sure. It's drivers typically, you see the way they study these, the way they model this is to show drivers eventually figure out the optimal route, the shortest time route for them to take, and they eventually go that way. So I'm sure plenty will try it, plenty will decide this isn't worth it and not take it, but some will utilize it. But it's going to capture a lot of internal trips that otherwise currently go very far west and then up on Menton just to turn back east again.
And are we comfortable with a traffic survey that was done before major road improvements were made in and around the area that would then change the input data to that 2017 traffic study?
Yeah, undoubtedly they used as existing conditions 2016 traffic data when they produced the report in 2017, and they modeled the homes in the area and what trips they would like to make. And so there are updated traffic counts. I'm not sure you would get any different data from having that relooked at. We weren't proposing that as part of this scope of work. We felt like that work was sufficient and weren't planning on doing another traffic study. That's certainly up to the council. It's not in the proposed scope of services.
I think there's a little, just to, Ms. Smith mentioned sort of a little history there. This project goes back to before really any of that area was built in Heritage Oaks. As far as the original idea was to create a connection point that's contemplated here, but also to where Doherty would continue south, connect with Fell Road, and then go out to Hollywood. And so that was really the original plan of this. And so when the developer came in for one of the, I guess it was the lower right development, that's when the attempt was made to get that built as part of that project. And then again with, it's Eastwood, because the other, with Eastwood too, and have that connect and then get that, have Heritage Oaks connect to Eastwood too, and then also have them connect that to Fell Road to go out to Hollywood. And so the decision was made not to require them to do that at the time. And the comp plan remained as is, as far as I know. And so we were left with this situation. And so I'm just telling you a little more of the history, that I'm not sure who the gentleman talked to about the hurricane evacuation or whatever, but it was really just planning at the time for traffic circulation throughout that part of the city. And it included, however many homes that were going to be built in there at the time. So that didn't happen. We're left with this possibly. And so I forgot to say that whereas before it wasn't included in the budget, the council chose to put it in the budget this time, and that's why we're here. If you want to do the project, we'll proceed with it. If not, then we won't. But just wanted a little more history, that this was supposed to be more of an overall plan with that connection to the south, which I should have said can't happen now, because that was never dedicated to the city down there. So what you see here is right-of-way, road right-of-way. We don't have it south of there, so that original plan can never happen. So just a little more history on this.
Yeah, and thank you for that. I appreciate that. So I see quite clearly both sides of the concerns here. I see the residents who want to find an exit from their subdivisions that does not go through Minton. And I completely sympathize with that and want to find a solution that supports that. I also see the problems that the residents who are going to have a road, whether they knew about it or not, put through their backyards because they are worried about damage to their property, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm getting the sense that for $130,000, we're not actually going to have clarity on the impact of this road, both for the implications that Ms. Smith brought up and the implications and the impacts on the residents, both in traffic alleviation for the residents leaving that area, but also the impact on those properties there. So I think for $130,000, I don't think we're going to get the answers that we want before we can make an informed decision about how to move forward with this. I would like to see something that is going to give us those answers, and then some plans that include multiple solutions. For example, perhaps both sides of the argument can actually consider what they would accept to help with each other's side of the argument. For example, putting in a more sturdy boundary between the road, perhaps leaving in a tree line, perhaps making sure that there are aggressive traffic calming measures along that road to thoroughly discourage anyone using it as a rat run. I would like to visit these options before we make any decision to move forward. So I'm very uncomfortable with the $130,000 when it appears that we're not going to get answers to some of the most fundamental questions that we have over this project.
Well, just to understood, but and I'm not advocating one way or the other for this, just trying to give you facts. But typically, the 130,000 you mentioned several times, as far as I know, the estimated cost of construction is about 1.2, 1.3 million. Typically, the design without traffic studies or other types of studies that you mentioned falls between 10, 15% of construction costs. So that's where the 130,000 approximately is sort of coming from. And it's based on what they have to do. That's just how it works out usually. Some you see closer to 15, some to 10, some in the middle. But it only includes the design portion of that. It does not include number one, in this case, it wouldn't include any kind of alternate. And number two, it would not include a revisitation of the traffic study.
Thank you. Mr. Gaffney?
Yeah, I guess one of my biggest concerns is flooding. I have spoken with a few of the residents out there. I've seen some pictures of the water backing up to the back sides of their property beyond the ditch. So that would be the biggest part if we do put a pipe in the ground, which would, I assume, have less volume than what we have currently, which is the ditch. I don't know if that would be correct or not, but
Which ditch are you referring to? Just
Canal.
the canal. I'm sorry, the canal.
Are we piping that canal?
No.
Sorry.
Well, this development or any of those don't go to that ditch.
Yeah, they don't.
Oh, they don't.
So that's why I'm not really sure.
Would you go ahead and explain that, where the water goes and how it's different from the other communities? And
Sure, it all flows. I mean,
Mike, see that screen.
you need the mic.
Take the microphone.
Yeah, we can't see
You may
that
need to
screen.
turn that screen so we can see it, because they point to it and we can't see it. Yeah, yeah. I would let him do that one. It goes.
Now the residents can't see that, so you can do it twice, or they can move one or the other.
okay, so all these developments, except for a small portion, I think, of Eastwood 2, all these developments in some manner flow south to the Melbourne-Tillman Canal and then go west. And so this ditch that you're talking about, let's see, where are we? Yeah,
Yeah, that ditch.
that I believe you're talking about, that, as we know, we've talked about, collects drainage all up in here and comes down and then goes east to a different end point. And so
The lots are
that's
great.
why when the drainage is mentioned, I wasn't sure what, but now I know.
Keith, can you point to if you point to the row of lots that's going to be adjacent to the future road, going north and south, there you go, on the east side of Botanica Circle. So those drain forward to the road into gutters, and then those go into the retention. But ultimately, yeah, the outflow is elsewhere.
Right.
Some of the lots that front on the pond have front and rear grading, so they drain half to the front and half to the rear.
And that could be the case in
But those lots don't drain to the rear and then into the ditch over there.
right.
That's not.
Part of the design will determine how the drainage is designed, and some of the road could go there, and I expect it probably will. Some of it could go south, but that would be determined by one of the things determined by the engineering study. And so, these lots that drain this way and that way aren't contributing to this, but this roadway could contribute to that, but would have, really not have an effect on these homes because they don't drain to this anyway.
Well, what's happening, just from the pictures I've seen, in the rear of their properties, there's a berm before it gets to the canal, and during a heavy rain, it's always flooded all the way down there.
Rear of
Rear of the house,
these,
right off Botanical Circle, yeah. Here, I'll show you.
Corrected.
Water collects behind the houses right there.
yeah, that's to be expected. It probably doesn't drain anywhere the way it is now.
I think what is there is the historic spoil from years and years ago when the canal drained, and so it was placed between the maintenance road and the backyards. And so rainwater that hits on top of that spoil can flow both directions. But if we were to proceed with this project, we would alleviate that problem by making sure that none of that current rain that hits on top of the spoil and flows into the yards, it would all flow towards the roadway and away from the lot. So that is just sort of what exists there now, but we would, as part of the project, in any way it would be designed, would be removal of that existing spoil, which is undoubtedly bad material and can't be used for other purposes.
Yeah. And
Yeah, I think, again, there's only a few lots over here in Eastwood 2, or I'll say Eastwood 2 has split drainage, my recollection. Most of it goes south like these other ones. There is a little bit that goes up to that ditch there.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how fast it flows out, but I know even our neighborhood, in a heavy rain, the entire street's covered, and it's a neighborhood as well. So we are still experiencing some problems, and, we're going right in between two developments and reducing it from a canal to a whatever size pipe, and I'm sure.
It's not being piped.
Wouldn't it be piped?
The
It would
canal's
still
going
be
to
a
stay
canal?
exactly
We just
as
go to
is.
the side of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's right away. It'll be there's every bit as much right away as Heritage Oaks Boulevard, the main. This is just like that.
Okay. And Mr. Bachelor, and of course, Mr. Dipmore and Mrs. Smith all brought up really good, valid points. I've talked to several residents that are for this and against this, and I haven't seen either way really go in favor of each other. I'm really confused at what to do right now. I need more data, I guess, or more support for the project to go forward. I would like to see the residents hear what their voice is. I know it ultimately directly impacts, those 4 communities there, and of course the new one that's going in. But I would like to see possibly even tabling this for 30 days, give them a chance to get a petition going, or, hear the voice of those residents in those areas. But I'm not sure what the right decision is right at this point. And that's all I've got.
Thank you. Ms. Young?
Thank you, Mayor.
No, you already spoke. You can, but I want everybody to hear it first. But I know yours is important. We will get to you.
By looking at the council has made, starting last year, we've made flooding our #1 priority throughout the entire city. Since there is a water issue there, which we all acknowledge, if you're telling us that it's flooding and you're knee deep out there, we need to pull this apart and look at it and fix it. If we just don't do anything at all and we don't do this study to find out what is the problem and fix it, we will never know, and this will just go on and on and on for years and years. We already voted several years ago to put the road through, but we don't want to just put any road through. It's got to be a properly designed road. What we're getting here, we are getting a very, very detailed report on what's going on. Mr. Morgan, the permit, how much of this cost of this $130,000 is for the St. John's water permit and all the other permitting?
Keith, do you know how many hours are devoted to that? But clearly, we would not be the sole determiner of how the roadway itself drains and how to meet the standards. Our engineer would prepare calculations that can be reviewed by anyone, but have to be approved by the St. Johns River Water Management District to meet the standard. So we're talking about rainwater that hits on the road bed itself that we have to mitigate. In terms of the water in the neighborhood, if you're thinking that this study might solve in neighborhood water, it would not.
Well, along the
Yeah,
existing
in the canal, we have a couple of projects that are not right in here, but could benefit this drainage area, which again, as Keith pointed out, it's not the same drainage area as the developed Heritage Oaks subdivision. One is upstream in the Bosso area to potentially divert some of that existing going into here to the Melbourne-Tillman system, which flows west instead of east and down into here. So take off some of the top at the headwaters so that in that design storm event, there's less water in the canal than there is currently.
I think, Scott, I think outside of the canal, you're talking about the standing water and the spoil between the canal and the homes, correct? That standing water
Yes.
back there, which this clearly
Right.
alleviates. That has to be addressed as part of this design, and the road itself takes that away.
Right, and that was my point.
Okay,
By
yes.
doing this, we're pulling that apart, we're looking at it, and we're
Exactly.
actually fixing that.
That condition back there actually prevents flow off the back. Not that they're designed to flow front those lots, but.
Yes, so that is something that we would need to do if we're going to fix floodings throughout West Melbourne, which is our plan. It's what we're trying to do anyway. That's something that we should be looking at anyway.
Yes, and so Kurt, of the larger picture of this particular reach of canal, again, one potential project upstream that diverts some existing flows into it so that at the storm, there's less flows going in. One potential improvement downstream, which is actually on your agenda later this evening, both potentially grant funded, but as Mr. Richardson pointed out, the basic design is not to change the open canal through this area, it's to maintain the existing open canal, but mitigate the water that hits right on top of the roadway, and obviously, as we discussed, the water that goes both sides off the spoil would all have to come forward into the road and not impact the neighbors' rear yards. So hopefully on the drainage, there's been enough discussion for council members to have a big picture of the drainage, but clearly if we proceed with this, that has to be accounted for in the engineering, has to be reviewed and approved by a different public agency, the St. Johns River Water Management District. So it's not just our engineer's calculations, it has to be reviewed by a St. John's engineer to make sure we don't create flooding from the project. And to the extent that we can relieve a little bit of nuisance water off the backyards, that would be part of the project.
Thank you very much. And also the environmental study that will be done, where it's 100% gopher tortoise burrow survey, and as well as a land survey. And we're even getting a tree analysis count for this work that's being done. I'm reading this here. And we are getting a very, very detailed report that makes sure that when the road goes through, it is a road and it is designed and it's going to be a betterment to the city. It's not going to cause these people any more problems than what they've already had, and will actually relieve some of the problems that they've had. Also, I wanted to mention that I live right off of Wingate, and of course, as some of you may know, Wingate has the 3 schools on it. So I've lived there for 16 years, and when these kids are walking to and from school all day in the morning and at night, and there's all the parent traffic and the parent loop, we've had no issues with it at all. And actually, by putting this through here, it actually takes the kids off of Minton, having to walk down Minton, because they can go through the new subdivision and through the path that we asked them to build specifically to keep the kids in the neighborhood longer and not have to walk next to Minton or to walk on Henry. So I think that this is actually benefiting, and once we see what we have, and we have an actual viable, doable project, we can go from there. If it comes back and we don't have a good project, then we don't have to go through with building it. But we won't know if we don't look at it. So all we're doing right now is looking at it and seeing what we have here so that we get a good report back to make sure we're doing the right thing. Already voted to put the road through. Now, is it the right road? Is it the right plan? And if we don't look at it, we'll just keep having these conversations. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Bentley?
Am I on there? Oh, I am.
You are. Your name's right there.
So, so far I've not supported this project on pretty much every vote, and we've gone through the details on that. You know, I do think it would be beneficial to provide Dan the traffic study so that he can have the information on any predicted traffic changes, because he is new to the council and so may not have seen that information. But on I think it was the last hurricane, I actually went out there and I parked on the northwest side of Dotery, and they were pumping water from the Dotery Street, what I would have called the existing Dotery Street, pond, whatever you want to call that thing, into the canal there on the south side of Henry Road. And that canal was cresting. It could not handle the water flow that was there. And if I understand correctly, you're going to leave the canal. I get that. I like that. And you're going to put the road between the canal and the neighborhood. And I don't quite understand how you can put a quarter mile, whatever that distance is, 2-lane impervious surface between those two and not expect to have more water runoff and less places for that water to go. So, you know, as Andrea alluded to, we had said flooding was our #1 concern this year. I don't know how you can put an impervious surface that length and that distance and that width and not create more flooding. I haven't seen a plan that covers that. So I still won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Some comments, some good discussion. I think the #1 thing that everybody's concerned about is, besides the flooding, is the access. Here we talked about Sawgrass only having one way in and one way out, and this was designed for a secondary road, a collector road, that's what we call it, because there's no houses that actually back onto the main drag. And that's the whole purpose of the way the place was designed. One of the things that happened over this week when they were repaving the entryway, I know I was the first one to light, and I sat through 5 lights before they let me in. And my wife later on was coming home, and they waved her around, so she drove around different areas to wait till they even opened up the road. Again, one way in and one way out is an issue. As far as the traffic, I think the bigger picture is, how does this affect the people getting out of the neighborhoods as opposed to the collector part of it? Getting out of the neighborhood, everybody's heading south to go all different directions. They go to the Minton Road. If we had the other way opened up, you can go both ways, obviously. Yes, there'll be cut-through traffic, but what development doesn't? I mean, people are going to find the shortcut, just like every one of you are saying. I'm not sure what number you're looking for as far as how many cars is too many on Heritage Oak Boulevard as a cut-through. I mean, is it if they get 10% more cars, 20, 30, or those kind of things? And I remember the survey, I don't remember the numbers, the one Mr. Morgan was alluding to. If the road was opened up, do you remember the number, how many cars head east and how many cars head west? Is it in there?
That study is really for internal trips and for the new trips generated by the development at the front. It wasn't about cut-throughs, but it did say that 20% of the trips in there would definitely want to go east, and an additional up to 25% that are eventually going north. Some percentage of that is going to choose, although, you know, it's hard to model at this point whether those would choose Minton or this. But so at least 20 of the internal trips are going to take this alternate route, and then between 20 and 45% ultimately of the internal.
Of the 700, 800 homes we have in there, we don't have a number how many head east and how many turn west.
We can't, well, yeah.
Yeah, so you have to model it.
Yeah.
So it's pretty easy to know each house generates just under 9 trips a day. We've talked about that. That's national studies. So you have 800 houses, and each of the neighborhoods has the same thing, east or west. It doesn't matter whether their entry is closer to Minton or not. People want to go to the destination they want to go and are going to take the most direct, fastest route. And so it's probably not a bad estimate to say that 45% of the trips would want to use this new route and therefore would come off the old route. That's sort of a gross overstatement, but not out of the realm of how you would model it if you remodeled it.
So the 802 homes in there generate 7,154 trips by the model. If you take the 20% that almost certainly would go that way, that's 1,430 trips. As much as a little more than double that could potentially use that route rather than going west all the way to Minton Road. And again, those are the internal trips from the subdivision. I think that does include, because this was done in relation to the commercial at the front and Heritage Point, so that does include the Heritage Point, which isn't built out yet, but I believe.
49 houses.
But I think as Councilmember Bachelor indicated, there would be some cut-through trips undoubtedly. So that's part of the modeling that you'd have to say, okay, so I've been told by traffic engineers that traffic's sort of like water. It finds its way. And so I think, as Mr. Richardson indicated, you're going to go through 3 4-way stop signs to get to the same point, or not, and it'll be what it is. But I think certainly people would use it, and that's the whole idea of the potential project, is that people would use this as a way of diverting some existing trips. And clearly why some people that back up to it don't want it, because they realize that probably the day it opens, you might get, 5,000 cars a day. And so a 2-lane road can handle, 4 times that. So in terms of capacity in the future, it's not under capacity to have a 2-lane road that would serve this purpose, even with a significant amount of cut-through traffic. So, if you're opposed to the project because it goes through your backyard and it's 5,000 trips a day or 8,000 trips a day, it sort of hardly matters. You don't like either of those. If you're for it because it's better for circulation because I use some of this route some part of my day, then you're sort of for it. So, this is kind of a critical decision for the council to, it's not the end. If you decide to proceed, the next thing that would come to you would be proposals from construction contractors that would bid on this design, and that would be sort of the build, no build. But obviously a good portion of this 130,000 would be sunk cost, not the part that is past the bidding. That's construction inspection services, so not all of it would be sunk cost. But this is sort of the time the staff would be looking for, policy decisions by the council to either, proceed or not to proceed, or gather more information. And if it's gather more information, what specifically would you like us to do in order to make a future decision? So kind of those 3 big picture policy choices.
As far as this engineering that we're doing, I guess Mr. Mills might know, what's the difference between this one that we're proposing now and the one we did before? I think this one has a lot more drainage study and making sure all those are better.
They're aware of this, as different council members have referenced tonight, that they have to get the drainage correct, and yes, they have budgeted to do that. And so they're putting however much in it for the drainage analysis, correct.
And
as far as the difference between the first one, other differences, I mean, you've got 2 rights of way that have the same width. That hasn't changed. It can only fit between those 2 lines. And so just the sort of design of it's not going to be a whole lot different than what it may have been from the first one in those terms.
Yeah, and as far as that, I know there's only so much room because that was figured out ahead of time. If the city moves forward with this, I'd propose that the city put in a fence at our expense, develop a fence at our expense, but yet have it on a HOA track. That way, we would deed it over to them and let them maintain it. We don't want to get in the fence business, but it would give them the privacy that it's not proposed on this anyway, but that can either be done as part of the bidding or an after thing, because there's room on their property to do that.
Well, that's the kind of thing that if the council is interested in something like that or other things that we can incorporate into the design, yeah, and then include in the bid documents. But, there's not a whole lot to in the way of a fence design. So, if that's what the one of the things is, then certainly that can be done.
And also, what was I going to say? As far as the intersection of Heritage Oaks and Henry, when we redid that intersection, we designed that to put a traffic light in there, I believe. Is that
Part of the improvements there were to anticipating, or possibly anticipating that this, it wasn't clear, just like it could be tonight to the staff, whether that project was just gone forever or not, but here it is back. So, but anyway, the turn lanes that were put in took into consideration the possible connection there, and then room was provided to, if at whatever point in time, and even without this, to put a possible traffic signal there if it warrants it, or if the council wants it.
okay? Thank you, Mr. Ditmore.
I'm sorry, Keith, I have a question. Something you said just caught my attention. You mentioned that the previous design was supposed to go out east and turn south, and then go out off the Fell Road.
Yeah, it wasn't a design. What it was the comp plan which is a guide. We all know that, but with all these houses that were coming in here, and knowing that even at that time there was issues on Henry and Minton, the idea was to, again, trying to, and as you know, east-west roads through the city were somewhat lacking and maybe still are. And so before the proposal for any of these homes were done, that comp plan requirement existed. And so, yes, as this was built, the idea was to get all these roads built and connected, including from here down to Fell over to Hollywood. And so you'd have it was much more of a circulation type thing in the beginning than it was an evacuation plan, although the two exits are a good thing.
What year did that change, roughly?
Well, I'm going to say, were you on? It could have been even pre-mayor. But when
That's a long time.
Yeah.
When they had dirt.
But it wasn't pre-me.
So it's not, before there was dirt.
Horses? I don't know.
Yeah.
Covered wagon trail.
Well, I'm not going to do any stand-up here. But there was quite the discussion, both, I believe, when this went in, between the council at the time, and then when this went in, to get this done. And at least that, and I'm sorry, and that. And the decision was made by the council that they weren't going to require the developer to do that, and so it never got done. And then the right-of-way was never dedicated, and that part just kind of flew away. So we're not dealing with the same, what we envisioned, the same vision at that time as this ends up.
So my question was, were people buying homes in this community based on that original plan?
That plan was in existence. The developer knew all about it. In fact, he didn't want to do it from, all of it from really day one.
The plan developed?
I don't know. We don't have, I've been told various things. We don't get involved in the sale of properties, and so I know that a lot of people knew about it. Others may not have.
What I'm trying to get at is that when this original plan was done for this community, it was supposed to go to Fell Road, correct? Is that what we were telling me?
Yeah, it would.
And at some point, it changed. At
Yes.
some point, my question is: had they already started building that community when that change took place?
Yes.
So there were people that lived in that community would have a reasonable expectation that that road was going to Fell Road and would not be going up the backside of Botanica. Is that correct?
No.
So,
Both would exist. That's my point. It wasn't just to provide circulation with all these homes going into the existing roads to the south, but also to the north. So all that was contemplated.
Mayor, I'm sorry, Keith, if I may, just to, I mean, with regard to what people knew or were told, so the city was in negotiations well before my time, but in what I've been able to piece together, discussions in the hopes that Fell would eventually extend east. A lot of resistance from the developer. I will tell you that what went into the plat back in 2005 before anybody bought a home in there just shows what's proposed here, which is the eastward extension of Heritage Oaks Boulevard to meet the southern extension of Doherty Drive. At the same time, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions that were recorded for Eastwood and for the preserve at Heritage Oaks in 2005 both state Heritage Oaks Boulevard may be extended to the east and connected with an extension of Doherty Avenue, which may be connected to Henry Avenue and Hollywood Boulevard by the city of West Melbourne. So there was a reference to the potential connection to Hollywood Boulevard as well in the docs.
Is that an amendment to the docs, or was that the original that was filed?
That's 2005. That's the original. That's
And it
the,
was worded that way because the,
In the first house?
developer felt the city should be responsible for some of it.
And when was the first house that started to be built there? Prior to 2005?
no, that's when the plat was recorded and the docs built. So it was, yeah, subsequent to that, because those two neighborhoods, the first two neighborhoods that were built prior are Woodfield and Brookshire. So these two neighborhoods were built subsequent to, homes were sold subsequent to these documents.
Okay, all right.
You've got an email from the first owner in the neighborhood actually today discussing that and what he was told at the time.
Okay. I just wanted to, I know what I'd read before, but when you mentioned that just now, it had me a little bit confused. All right. The second thing is, have we ever done an actual traffic counter out there? By the way, I know we're counting trips and based on homes. Do we have a traffic counter?
Out where?
On Heritage.
I don't believe so. Well, I don't know if this, I haven't seen that study that was done for the commercial. I assume they may have, I don't know.
The study is based on projected trips, just using the ITA, the model numbers.
But for single-family residential, that trip count is pretty good. If it says it's 7,000 trips off the 800 houses, it might be 608,
Well, I'm just,
6,800, or it might be 7,200, but it's not going to vary.
Does the city
change
own that
decision-making.
equipment? Do we have that type of equipment? And not just for this community, but I'm thinking for other things as well.
Raw 24 traffic counts.
Do we have?
Yeah,
the
we
actual-
don't
the
count
counter?
traffic on city streets. The county and the TPO counts every year, every fall, all the arterials and major collectors. They have some data on some of our collectors, but we don't collect data on locals.
I'm thinking about for the other projects down on Norfolk Parkway as well. I'm just thinking the amount of traffic to be able to count that later
And the
down the
speed
road.
trailer counts trips, right?
We don't.
Yeah, I mean, that's, we can take a 1-week sample.
We can take a sample, but we don't have any in place. But the speed trailer can, if you
Right.
plant it somewhere, it'll count the number of trips while it's
Typically,
there.
we leave that for a week, and so that'll give you a
Okay.
24-hour count on a 1-week sample
And
basis.
the last thing I just wanted to bring up is that I forgot to bring up, and this is what I wanted to talk about before, was in my earlier research, we were talking about the facility at the long-term care facility that was going in on Minton. I contacted the police department and requested information regarding the crashes at Heritage and Minton. I was somewhat shocked that we've only had one, unless something's taken place since the last meeting. We had one traffic crash there the entire year. So for an area that's has a lot of traffic, has a lot of issues, to have one traffic crash does not represent a huge traffic issue on Minton at this particular point. I would expect to see more crashes, more issues going on. So either we have really good drivers, or we don't have the traffic problem that we say we have.
Well, certainly what the county did at our recommendation and suggestion when they realigned the two opposing left turn pockets off of Minton to Milwaukee and Heritage Oaks, they were set up to where it was sort of visually difficult to see oncoming cars. So if you didn't have a protected left, you couldn't see very far. When we asked them and when they did the repaving to offset them, they did. And so now that vision is much better. And so I would expect fewer left turn movement, through movement crashes because it's visually much better. And that was sort of a engineering pavement change rather than an enforcement change or a traffic volume count. That was sort of the geometrics of that particular intersection.
Well, I'm just saying, we don't have any crash data that would support an issue with a high traffic area. So we don't have traffic crashes to say, there's a number of traffic crashes that would support some type of, we need to do something right away type situation. Because it's not supported by any unusual amount of traffic crashes there. One in the entire year is remarkable, believe it or not. I mean, it's completely remarkable. I give credit to the police department for the excellent work they do, but.
So what you do, I mean, I guess anecdotally, traffic accidents can show traffic at an intersection, but the actual traffic reports on the traffic at that intersection show existing level of service failures from Henry to Milwaukee and Milwaukee to Wingate at peak drive time hours. So there is a traffic. Congestion. Yes, there's congestion. So I mean, are you talking about safety issue or?
What are you reading from? Because what is that you're?
From the traffic study that was done back in 16, but there were existing level of service failures from Henry to Milwaukee Avenue and Milwaukee Avenue to Wingate Boulevard. Now, whether the opening of the Heritage Parkway alleviated that enough so those are no longer failing, I'm not certain. I can tell you, for me, driving out there in the morning, that's still a very busy intersection.
AM, it probably.
Fortunately, there haven't been many accidents. When there have been, it's very difficult to get out. What's been more frequent of late is the county, I'm sure as the mayor could tell you, the county traffic signal there failing, which causes pretty serious backups during peak drive time, as well as whenever there's an accident on 95 that causes rerouting of traffic over Medon. It's virtually impossible to get out of the neighborhood. But
And let me ask you, so if we had Doherty Road back there, where would the traffic go if the traffic's backed on 95? I mean, they're going to have the same problem coming down on Henry, correct? They're going to be stuck at Minton and Henry. Is it going to
there will be some traffic stuck there, but you can potentially get out of the neighborhood and go somewhere, right? You're going to have problems. You might have problems going on to Minton Road if that's your ultimate destination. But,
right. Oh, that's what I'm saying.
But if you're going elsewhere, right now, half of the trips are going to want to go that direction, and they can't go anywhere either.
I mean, we don't really know where people are heading in the morning for sure, but I would say most people are probably heading to work or heading to taking a child to school or something. That's usually where they're going in the morning. So, where are they going? We really don't know, but I just know the traffic is backed up on Henry tremendously, and adding an additional artery onto Henry with the road improvements or the Hollywood road improvements not been done yet, I think it's going to be a mistake, but that's my opinion on it. So, okay, thank you.
Well, just one quick comment, and Ms. Smith. We do have in our 5-year plan to extend Fell Road to Derry, another east-west thing. So that's in the 5-year plan as we just voted on. Ms. Smith?
Yes, I just want to say, we've been discussing all this in length, and everybody has good intentions, some more political than others. I'm not political, but I do believe that we don't have the answers. We're teachers and cops and professors and whatever, and so we're saying maybe it might flood or will flood. Maybe it will do this, but why don't we? It is a high-priced item, and maybe we're not going to go there, but we don't know anything unless we do the study. Let them study it, and let's also have an up-to-date 2019 traffic study, so do the 2 studies, and then we have data to look at instead of who's complaining, who's screaming, who's saying stuff, whatever. We have plenty of emails today from both sides, so it's not like it's one-sided. There are both sides. Look at your emails. But we don't know anything. We're not the experts. I know it sounds like a lot of money, but in comparison to the millions it's going to cost, it's not. And we know nothing. So why don't we get the facts and then have this discussion? But the facts has to include a 2019 traffic study. Then we've covered all the areas. We know about flooding. We know about how many feet this way and that way from the ditch. We'll know everything. And then based on the expert's opinion, then make a real good choice instead of dividing everybody here and knowing nothing. So that, my recommendation is to approve the study and add on a traffic study for done in 2019, and then we'll talk. And it's minimal in comparison to the millions, but it makes us be a little bit more informed. We're not informed either way. So there is a motion on the floor.
Yes, there is. All right, Mr. Bashir.
I think you're absolutely spot on there, Ms. Smith. We don't have the information we need to make an informed decision, and I would support one of the recommendations of the city managers to follow the gather more information model. I think there are two key points: drainage and traffic. And I do not think we need to spend $130,000 to find out the answers to other questions until we are confident that we understand the drainage and the traffic. So is there some way that this task order can be modified so that we find out about those two questions first before authorizing spending on the other components of the currently proposed task order?
Well, I believe that the task order could be modified with reference probably to the drainage. I'm not sure. I'd have to talk to the engineers about that. As far as the traffic study, that would be a completely different, First of all, this isn't a study. This is a design. The task for this is the design of the project, so it's not a study. But they're not, the task order, I don't believe, would be modified to include a traffic study.
But it's fair to say that you can't design something until you've done the study, because the study informs your design.
Mr. Morgan, you want your experience in
Yeah, in terms of the traffic study, I wouldn't know if DRMP has a traffic engineer, a registered TE. Whether they do or not, it's not a large ticket item to get you an updated estimate of the distribution of trips from current to proposed, and we could use current available data and get you that. But I think what that would do was to get you to okay, this is how many trips would be expected by the model to use this new route. The traffic study would not, I think the existing scope on the drainage would provide everything you would ever want on the drainage. But the traffic study, we may want to use a traffic engineer, that's what the firm specializes in, as a potentially separate. So if the council approves the motion as amended by Councilmember Smith's discussion about the traffic study, I would certainly look to get some quotes from some traffic engineers, but that would, I'm going to say, almost undoubtedly be under my administrative limit of $15,000 to accomplish that, because that's not a lot of hours of task to take the existing trips and distribute them over this potential new network and tell you what those results are. That's a, help me, Keith, couple week task, 3-week task. They have these models and you plug them in, and
I'm not going to.
It's not a long, extensive.
No, it's not very long.
They use usually Synchro as the model, and it's pretty standard in the industry.
But I think we also need to understand, exactly what the council is looking for in this study. If it's only a model that's going to show the trips going whichever way, okay. But if, I guess I'm trying to make sure that the study that you're talking about is something that will give you the information for you to make your decision. So I think we need to be sure exactly what it is you're looking for.
A typical traffic study of this would take the existing data, show you existing conditions, Then it would show you as if this leg were constructed and redistribute those trips. So you would see trips down and you would see trips up at all the legs and all the intersections in both directions. So that's what you would see in an updated traffic model to tell you whether you want to do the project or not, but it would show you where you get traffic benefit and where clearly there's 0 trips on what's not built. There'd be a distribution of trips on that leg. They would come from elsewhere, and you would see what the net is.
Would that include Henry and Hollywood?
Typically, you would take this probably at least a mile in all directions and look at all links and intersections, and so you would distribute it out reasonably far.
But I guess, if, is the question, are you looking to see a certain number of trips go a certain way to help you make your decision? Is that what you're looking for as the result?
I think what we're looking for is appropriate data to make a decision that's going to both benefit the residents that are experiencing traffic trouble without creating a situation where there could be excessive traffic that's using it as a rat run that would just create 2 exits that are now congested. And we're also looking for a solution that categorically demonstrates that residents whose properties back up to the potential road are actually going to experience better drainage than they already have. And so this is not a question of whether or not we're not deciding whether or not to move forward with the road. We're trying to get the data to inform the potential designs of a road. So if, for example, the results of the study showed, yes, there will be excessive traffic that is using this as a rat run and creating congestion at what would be the 4-way stop at Dorothy and Henry, we should look at designs that will discourage beyond the 3 4-way stops, because I'm sure that won't discourage anyone, but traffic calming measures, speed humps, these should all be part of the design. And if we do come up with a design that does alleviate the drainage issue that residents are currently experiencing, that may include some elements that have a significant impact of the cost of this project. And so with those 2 questions, the drainage and the traffic, I think we would be able to move forward in a much more informed way when it comes to looking at potential designs. So that's where I'm coming from.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor Bentley.
Thank you, Mayor. I still have the same issue, and I'm trying to see a feasible solution, and I've not been able, at least on my own, to come up with one. So maybe, Keith, you can help me. Currently, as I indicated when I was there during the hurricane, that existing canal was cresting. It was actually coming over onto the walking dirt path. Between the path and the houses were flooded. The houses weren't yet flooded, but that whole area was flooded. You put a 1/4 mile, I'm making that distance up, 30-foot wide impervious surface. Where are you possibly going to run that water to? Because all that area that is currently soaking water, that road, is not going to be there to be soaked. So it's going to run off into their backyards, has nowhere else to go because the other canal's crested.
Well, I think this goes back to conversations discussions that have been ongoing for several years once we start experiencing these big rains. And that is that the first thing, we hear people talk about drainage issues and the lack of, facilities to deal with them. Well, all these projects are designed to the 25-year storm. And so most of the time when we're talking about issues with either water in homes or water near homes, we're talking about much more than the 25-year storm. And so this project, like anything else, would be designed for the 25-year storm. And if we get a 150-year storm, like we've been experiencing now and again, then the water is going to go to where it tries to go just naturally. We try to help it along with some of the pumping we do from, one side to the other of Henry. And so the design is going to show that for the 25-year storm, then that it will take it to that ditch, I think, mostly.
If we would have had this road,
that would work.
if
But
we would have had this road there 2 years ago, they would have flooded. The water has nowhere else to go. Mr. Morgan, can you show me a possible solution
For
what I've described?
Yeah, when that peaks in a storm event, there are a couple solutions that we are proposing with other projects. A, to reduce the amount of water coming from the drainage basin upstream.
We tried that last time. We actually tried to pre-drain the one on Doherty.
No, I'm talking about a larger project that actually diverts water that's in this basin that goes to this canal to a different basin.
When's that going to happen?
Upstream. We have that as an engineering proposal later on tonight's agenda. So if we do that engineering and if we get the grants we think we're going to get, that would potentially be a 2020 construction.
What if we don't get the grants?
We don't have enough money in the stormwater fund to build those projects.
So then we'll just flood the people.
But again, that
Well, this would be improvement in that entire drainage basin if we're able to construct it. It wouldn't not just benefit this segment between these two neighborhoods, it would benefit that entire drainage basin. The other piece is downstream, where we can actually impound some storm water at the wastewater treatment plant. So we have in this same canal system, an upstream solution and a downstream solution.
That's a grant in the future?
That's also grant.
Does it make sense to do the project prior to working the water issue and making sure that we don't put them in a bad situation? You're talking about building the road soon, within the next
The
year.
engineers would never design a project that makes it worse, only better. We would not accept a product to put out to bid if it made the existing circumstance worse,
And I
only if it
understand.
made it better.
And I understand that, but give me a scenario that you think is actually workable today based on the scenario that we're adding quarter-mile of impervious surface, taking away all that drainage there, and looking at what we had at the last storm there.
You have to impound it, and so you have to find the impoundment location. So one potential engineering solution is what the county is looking at for Hollywood Boulevard between Henry and 192, which is a long, skinny impoundment basin.
When's that scheduled to be done?
Well, that would be part of the design of this project as an engineering alternative. As another alternative, could you find a place towards the south end where the canal turns to have a more rectangular shaped impoundment basin? That's for the engineer to determine what would be the most efficient way of taking that water that's hitting the new impervious and impounding it to meet the 25-year storm event. We haven't done the design yet, so those are sort of two big picture alternatives that could be employed in this project.
But again, that's for the 25-year storm, not some bigger storm.
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at these people would have flooded
I
years
understand.
ago if we had the street. And so I'm wondering why we don't do something to solve that issue prior to doing a street design. We kind of know what the street's going to look like. I mean, it's going to be black and it's going to be this long and this wide. So it should not be that difficult to figure out how much water are we going to displace by doing that. And currently, without a grant, we have no solution that I can think of to correct that, short of getting a grant, which is going to be in several years.
You're asking, absent this project, what might we do to reduce flood risk in this neighborhood? And it would be sort of the same thing we would do with this project, which would be to remove the spoil and sort of increase the height that flows away from the backyards towards the canal, but that doesn't help when the canal crests, other than you have a higher elevation on both sides so it can crest higher, which is what the road would do if a road were built there.
You're taking away that entire surface that that water currently has to go, which is a 1/4 mile long and 30 feet wide, because it can soak into the ground till it fills up.
All right. So we have a motion on the floor from Ms. Smith, second from Ms. Young, to do the engineering, and then we talked about doing a separate traffic study.
That's correct. My understanding is that the motion includes, if it were to pass, authorization to conduct a traffic study prior to, and we'd bring that back to the council sooner than the full engineering, because that won't take as long.
And as far as, Mr. Mills, you were talking before on the impact of the water, I don't know if, can they do a partial, and if so, they're not going to get a permit without knowing what's going to be blacktopped and all that, correct? So it's like doing some things twice. You really, either you do it all or you don't do it, or what does that look like?
That's why we would have to talk to them about it. They could do some
Concept.
They could do some things without the whole, doing all the plans.
Right, but even if we do it all and they can't,
We'd really have to discuss with them sort of what you all are looking for and see if there's a way they can come up with something.
They can tell you what their plan is for
Right.
where the water is going to go. So
Yeah, but
if you
we
look at
already
existing
kinda know
Heritage
that.
Oaks
Yeah.
Boulevard, it doesn't have a big strip alongside it. It has houses on either side, and yet it doesn't flood those neighboring yards because the water is sent somewhere. It doesn't have a canal to flow beside it. So just because of the proximity of the canal, that doesn't mean that's where the water is going to be sent from the road project.
and if we do this whole engineering study and it comes back, the water doesn't work, well, it's a no-go. I mean, it's pretty simple.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, that I would.
So we're not going to learn anything just doing part of it.
Well, I think what it sounds like the council would like to see would be on a preliminary or concept basis, what would be the concept that they would recommend? So they would have to do enough work to tell you, okay, we need a long skinny retention basin, or we need a rectangular basin sitting at this location, or some combination thereof. Before you get to final design, we could come back and tell you what the concept of the retention would be. Now, whether that helps you with your go or no-go decision, I don't know, but clearly we cannot make flooding worse for existing residents. We can only make it better. We would not proceed with a project that adversely impacts existing residents. We just wouldn't do that.
Thank you. Ms. Young?
I just want to make just a short comment. There is permeable concrete. Mr. Mills, are you familiar with permeable concrete?
Yes.
So that is, if we look at this further, this was one of the things that we could ask about.
We could. I was going to say it's much more used in parking lots where you don't have continuous traffic, and that, you know, and a lot of times it's used as sort of in conjunction with other standardly paved areas. But I mean, we can ask them about that.
All right, thank you. And it's called Top Mix, I think is the name of it, or one of them anyway.
Got it.
All right, let's go ahead and call for the vote. So
Mayor, before, I just want to make sure that, not knowing what the cost of the drainage part of, Mr. Morgan has said he was confident that the traffic study part of it was probably under 15,000. I'm not sure what the drainage sort of concept study would be. It could be, but I'm wondering if he could be authorized to proceed with whatever it costs to get that concept plan done as part of the motion, if that's what you all want.
no, I think what we have on the motion is to, as presented here, to do the engineering test order. Is that correct? That's my understanding. That was her motion, and that was her second, yeah.
For
And,
the full study?
yes,
Okay, then no
yeah,
issue.
okay.
I
All
thought
right.
you were talking about splitting it up with just part of it.
No, we want to see if, that was a good question, see if it's worth doing that, but it's, then you go back to the drawing board after that. Okay.
Okay, we're good.
All in favor of doing the task order and the traffic survey as given Mr. Morgan the ability to do that, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose?
Nay.
Okay, let's just do a roll call on that then. Start with Ms.
Councilmember Smith? Aye. Councilmember Young?
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Bentley? No. Councilmember Gaffney? No. Councilmember Ditmore?
Nay.
Councilmember Bachelor? Mayor Rose?
Yes, motion fails 4-3. All right.